Hello, thanks for joining me in this new video. Today we are working in Bricks and we are building Airbnbricks. This is what our target is for this clone of Airbnb. This is the actual front end of the Airbnbricks site. This is what it looks like in the editor. For information, this is the actual Airbnb website with the search, with the cards, of course, the categories. This is our Airbnbricks area. We have a search form, we have our categories, we have our cards. So it's very similar to the actual site, or at least it's similar in aspect because, of course, Airbnb is a site built in React with a lot of JavaScript. We are not working with JavaScript. We will focus on the HTML structure and on the design, on the CSS of the website. And to keep this video not too long, we will not build everything today. We will focus on the top part of the page, on the banner and the search area. I am planning a series of videos to achieve this build. Let me know in the comment if you are interested, if you want me to continue with the following ones once we are done with this one. But today we will focus on the upper part, which is already a nice piece of work. So first, let's get back into Bricks and get rid of what we have for now. Okay, so now we have a clean slate. Just before we start, let me tell you that you can go to the Structeezy doc site. There's a new section for the tutorials, and on this page you will find all the assets, all the source code you will need if you want to follow along with me building this page. If you are a Structeezy user, of course it will be very easy for you. If you are not using Structeezy, you can still follow the tutorial. You will find everything needed on this page, especially the styles and the CSS. But of course, you will have to insert this manually in your Bricks builder. You will find the links in the video description. Okay, so on this website, I have Bricks installed, of course, and I have Structeezy installed, and that's all. No other plugins, nothing at all. I just opened the Structeezy panel. I configured it to open on the parser. That's the new feature I introduced in the last version. And well, this feature is pretty awesome because it's able to convert any piece of HTML code to Bricks elements and a brick structure. So what does that mean? Well, I think maybe some of you have in mind that we can go to the Airbnb website. We can inspect the source code. We can go and look for this one, the root element, actually the application. Airbnb is a React application. It's built with React, so if you don't know how React works, where there's a div somewhere in the page, that's the root, and the application, that's a React one, but it would be the same for a Vue one, lives inside of this root div. So this is the root of the application, and actually this one is an element that contains the whole site. When you are in the DevTools, you can right click an element, and when the menu opens, you can copy, and you can copy the element. This will copy the element and all of its children. You can copy the outer HTML, you can copy the selectors, etc., the styles, but you can copy the element. Come back to your editor, paste this code inside of the Structeezy parser, and click Parse and Inject. So we see something appeared in the structure tree. This means that Structeezy has done its job and is feeding all of this structure to Bricks. Now Bricks is working. It's a really big structure that I just gave it. So we can wait a little, can take a coffee. And now Bricks has finished its job. The structure is visible in our editor. We are finished, you can go have a rest and enjoy. Bye. Well, actually, no. This is not what you want to do. I mean, this is feasible, we just did it, but this is not because we did it, because we can do it, that we have to do it. Why? Because what we just did is to import a very dirty, a very bloated code structure into our website. Why? Because the source code of Airbnb, as I said, it's a React application. It's built to work with React. It has a lot of components, a lot of nesting. And in the structure we just imported, there are plenty of elements that are useless for us. So what we just did in trying to import a full complex website is not what you will do on a daily basis. But the principle is interesting to import parts of the website. Imagine you browse the web, you find a card that's interesting. Well, you can pick this component, import it to study the way it is structured. And what we will see today is that with Structeezy in Bricks, we will start more and more thinking in terms of component. The same way we would work with a JavaScript framework like React, like Vue, or etc. And on this page, we have plenty of components. The banner at the top is a component. It can live by itself. The logo block is a component. This menu here is a component, etc., etc. So now that we know that this is feasible, let's start again. And by the way, if you try to do what I just did, you will probably have performance troubles in Bricks. It can become very slow or even freeze because we just gave it a huge amount of elements, of components to deal with, and probably too much depending on the machine you are working on. Of course, if you have a very powerful machine with a lot of memory, you may have no problems at all, but most of the time you probably will have issues. Okay, so let's start again from scratch and try to do it the proper way this time. And now I just refreshed the page, I did not save. So how would we do this in a practical way? Because what I just did, trying to analyze the structure of an element, an interesting element I found on the web, is something interesting. And as a developer, it's something you usually do to develop your own skills. Well, the way to do it is that instead of importing a whole page like I did, you will focus on a component, on a part of it. We can focus on the banner, for example. In the structure, you just have to find the root of it. That's the element, the root element for my banner. And I can copy my element and import it. And when I import it, we can see, I will zoom a little, that's the source of the element. And we can see that this website is working with a lot of utility classes, plenty of them. There's no way to understand what each of them mean. These are random identifiers generated at build time. So when you import it in Structeezy, you can decide to keep the classes on the original structure or to eliminate the classes. If you are working on a sandbox and you will get rid of the website after doing your analysis work, there's no problem. But when you choose to import with the classes, actually when the toggle is on, it will strip the classes. So the classes will be eliminated from the import. If you choose to keep them, each individual class will be registered as a Bricks global class. So I have no interest in keeping those classes because they are meaningless, except if I copy the CSS from the source website, what I just did earlier when importing the whole site. But imagine you are working with a CSS framework, you are working with OxyProps, my own CSS framework, or another one, and you copy a structure where the classes in the structure are classes known by your framework because you use it on your website. Well, when you import the structure with classes that are defined on your own website, well, you will get immediately the associated styles, of course. So if we want to study only the structure, we can strip the classes and import our structure. And this allows us to analyze how this component was created. And it's simple. It's a banner with simply a link inside of it. And we can see that a React application creates a lot of nested elements to handle that. And there are actually 3 versions of our text. So starting from a structure like this one, you have several ways to handle it. So you can import it like that, get rid of the elements that you don't want to keep. This is the H1, the root. This is an empty span. I can get rid of it. And I have no styles, of course, but when analyzing the structure, what you notice, and maybe this will be more visible here, if I click on it, it will be highlighted. There is a grid. And probably this component was designed with the idea that we have a main content, but something can live on the 2 other cells, promotional element, pictures, anything. So instead of thinking our component as a simple sections with only a centered text, well, let's keep it modular and keep the grid. But even by keeping the grid, we can do something much more simple compared to what we have here. So if you are interested in this process, tell me in the comments and I can plan a video working specifically on a single component and making this analysis from the source one of what can be stripped away, what can be kept, and how do we turn something we found into something we can and we want to use on our website. But for now, I did the job for you, and we can go to this list, and there's a list of components. For each component, there's a styled version and an unstyled version. You can see that the unstyled version is usually much later than the styled one. But of course, if we want to design a website, we need the styles. And as we are working with pure CSS today, we need our CSS. So I just copied this structure, and maybe I will move my windows so it will be easier to go from the editor there. I'll remove what was here. I'll open my Structeezy panel, paste my structure. It's exactly what I did from the source Airbnb website, but this time it's my own code that I'm importing. It's a component that I have prepared, and this component includes the HTML structures and the CSS it needs. And this is the idea of modular components. That's exactly what happens when we work in a JavaScript framework, for example. The idea is that the components are autonomous. A component includes everything it needs: the HTML structure, the styles, and the JavaScript logic. So when you take your component and you reuse it somewhere else, it includes everything it needs. And that's the way I want to think of components, of these code snippets in Structeezy, like components, autonomous components for bricks. I hear you ask the question, once I have this code inside of Structeezy, can I save it to reuse my component later? So the answer is, for now you can't, but you will be able to do it soon in the next version. Not necessarily the next version, but one of the next versions. Meaning that you can prepare your code, and once it's here, you save it, and then you will have a code snippets library that you can use to inject directly inside of your structure. So the one I just added is my site wrapper. That's a very simple one. It's only a div, and it has a style element with it, and with this style element, it's a bricks code element with a style tag, and it contains the styles that will be needed for the website. So there are a few styles for the wrapper itself. There are CSS variables that will be used by the children components, like colors, the brand color, some dimensions, padding, easings, letter spacing, font sizes, etc. It's like a very small theme that will be shared by other components. And these are carried by the parent component. When we work with components in mind, that's often something that happens. We have components that wrapper components that create layouts, and inside of these wrapper components, we have other elements to create our design. But it's quite common to have wrapper and layout components. And now that we have our wrapper, this will be the root of our application, and we can add other components. The next component is our banner, and I will grab the style banner. It's a bit more complex, but if we compare it to what we saw earlier, so this is HTML code, simple HTML code. I guess if you are a web developer that you are at least a minimum familiar with HTML. We have a div that will contain the whole component. Then we have an other div that creates the inner layout. And then we have an H1. The H1 is a bit particular if you are used to HTML, because this H1 has an href attribute, which is unusual. But Structeezy parser is able to handle this, and you will see what happens. I copied my element. Coming back here, get rid of what's inside of it, paste my new code. I make sure that I'm at my site wrapper level, and I will inject my component. Let's move the window so we see what happened. And now I have my component. So what was just added is the wrapper around the whole component. It includes the style with the styles needed only for this component, especially for this component. So there are classes defined for each element inside of the component. And then we have the layout that creates the grid, the 3 columns grid. We have an H1 that's in the central one, and that's it. So if you remember earlier, by importing directly from the source website, we had, I don't remember, but more than 10 elements for this component. Now we have only 3. Just a note about this H1 with an href here. If we look at this element, it was imported as a bricks heading element. So the Structeezy parser did convert the H1 tag it found in the source code into a bricks heading element, exactly if I had clicked on my element panel, grabbed a heading. Let's do it side by side to compare. Grabbed a heading, went to the HTML tag, picked an H1, Then select an external URL and add the URL to my homepage. What I just did manually by hand, inserting the heading, picking the correct tag, the external URL, the URL itself, well, Structeezy parser did it all by itself, simply because, and I will get rid of this one, simply because I gave him an h1. So writing h1 tells the parser I want a heading with a tag of h1. I can give my h1 an href attribute of anything, a / to represent the root of my website, but it could be google.com, anything. I can add my content, my heading, and what I'm using here is the emmet syntax, and the emmet syntax will expand when I hit tab at the end of my code snippet. It expands it to an HTML structure. So I have my h1 with an href attribute, which is unusual in HTML. In standard HTML, you don't have href on h1s, but in the parser you can. And if I click, I will make sure I'm at the parent level. I click inject, I get my h1 with the content of my heading, an h1 tag, an external URL that points to google.com. Okay, so writing this simple line of code in Structeezy did all this job for me. Inserting the element, changing the tag, changing the link attribute to external, and inserting, the target URL. Perfect. Other than this h1 specific syntax, in this component, well, so the component carries the styles, but once it's inserted, you do what you want with your styles. You can move the styles, you can combine them, you can move it to an external style sheet, do whatever you want. You can modify them, of course. And what I can tell you is that on the components, we are dealing with keyboard navigation and the focus state, because I did reproduce what's happening on the Airbnb website. If we tab, we have those outlines around the elements. And this is what happens here with this particular selector, which targets the focus visible pseudo class. And when the element is focus visible, it adds a box shadow. And there's something interesting to notice with this box shadow is that there are actually two box shadows. A first one, which is close to white, and a second one, which is close to black. And they are one inside another. The first one, the white one, is 2 pixels, and the other one extends to 4 pixels, so it's also 2 pixels. Maybe if we go and have a look. So let's have a look on this one. Let's tab here. I hope this is visible on the video, but we can see that there's an external ring, a dark one, and an internal ring, a light one. And when you work on your outlines for accessibility reason, you want it to be visible, well contrasted. It's a good practice to have a dark and a light color together, one inside another, because the dark one will, as it is here, will be well visible on a light background, but the same element on a dark background, maybe the dark outline will not be very visible, and the white one will help us. I can show you by maybe changing the background to black for the element. So now, of course, it's very black. And if I tab, now it's the white ring that's visible because the black one is not visible at all. So that's an interesting trick when you work with your outlines to always have a dark one and a light one. This way your outline will be visible whatever the background. So let's continue. The next component is the header component. It's a wrapper. Let's copy the component and insert it. Just make sure you are at the site wrapper level and inject my component. It's a wrapper. Here, the only thing visible, I hope it's visible on the video, is the small box shadow at the bottom, showing the limit. And looking at this component, there's the external wrapper, there's the header element inside of it, and then we have the container, the slot. I name it the slot. Usually a slot, when you are working with components, is the place where you insert the children components inside your component. So when I name slot somewhere, it's a way to remember that this is where we can insert children elements. So once again, we are creating the layout with this external component, and now we can insert components inside of it. There's nothing really fancy about it. We can have a look at the styles. It's a position sticky, meaning that when the page will scroll, this header will move until it reaches the top of the document, and then it will stay at the top. And then inside of it, we have our container that create a flex layout for the children. It's a flex row. And now we will add components inside of it. We will start with our logo component. Let's select the slot, get rid of the previous code, paste, inject, and we get our logo block. This is the structure. We have a wrapper div, a link, and inside of this link, we have two versions of our SVG. A large one with two paths. The two paths are the logo itself and the logo type. And we have a second version, which is a smaller one that will be used on smaller screens. And the way this happens, if we go and have a look at our styles, we have a media query at the bottom. The media query works with mobile first logic. So by default, the small logo has a display block, so it is visible, and the large one has a display none. And with this media query, at the breakpoint of 70 ems, they switch. So the logo type becomes display block, visible, and the small one, the logo SVG, becomes display none. Okay, we can even see it switch when we enlarge the sidebar. Just another thing, we can see that the color of our logo is inherited from the wrapper, the general styles given by the wrapper, and is using our brand color. Let's move to the next element. I will wrap my logo, select my slot, and this time I want to add my search component. Once again, it's a wrapper that creates a layout, and I kept the original Airbnb logic. We could imagine creating this component using two rows, one on top of the other. It's actually a bit different because the wrapper is this one on our flex column. The general element created the height, enough space, but this actually lives inside of this div. And it is absolutely positioned just below it. The reason they did this is that on the Airbnb application, with all the JavaScript involved, this component is moving, is resized, and its content is dynamically changed based on the selection, the tab button selections we have on top of it. We will not create such a logic on our site, but I kept the principle of this layout, because it's interesting to see how it was done. So this is our component, the wrapper, the search inner, we can see it highlighted. We can see that it extends. Then we have the form, the search, which is the upper part, so that's the first slot, and the second slot for the search input. So in the top slot, we will insert the next component. We'll start by the top, so we'll grab the text button, the styled version, because at least for the first button, we need to import the styles. Let's add it. Here it is. Now that it's imported, of course, it's a Bricks element. I can use the Bricks UI to change the text, and the text for this button is stays, if I remember well. And the button has two classes, the base class, text-btn, and a modifier class, text-btn --emphasis, that adds this darker and bold type to it. Of course, we have only one, so we don't see the difference, but let's just duplicate it. Now I have a second one, and on this second one, I will remove the class. So we see the difference. This one will be experiences, and I will duplicate it once again, and this one will be online experiences. Let's save, doc my Structeezy. We can see that on the buttons we have a hover effect with this pill shape, light gray background. Once again, it's interesting to see how this is achieved, because usually when we design a button, we extend it with padding and we change the background color of the button. That's not the way it's done. And thanks to the bricks outlines, we can see that this pill shape extends outside of the button limits. And this is because it's not the element background, but it's a pseudo element. It's the before element, and it's a before element absolutely position that extends outside of the button limits, that is activated or deactivated based on the hover state of the button. We can have a look at the styles for this. It's not this one, it's this one. We have the definition of our button. If I can move. And here it is. We have our before with an inset of -3. That's why it extends outside of the limits of our button. And then we have the hover state. On our button, on hover, the before element background turns gray 1. Once again, we have our focus visible state to manage keyboard navigation with this double box shadow, white and dark. Okay, so we are done with the central part, the tabs. On the actual application, if we were designing the logic, this would be a tab element with 3 tabs, the tab buttons, and the content of each tab would appear inside of this pill shape area. So let's add something inside this area. This is our search input. I will pick the styled version, copy it, make sure that I pick the correct slot, so it is the second slot, empty my code, paste the new one, and it looks weird, and this is because for some reason Bricks has difficulties to render properly in the editor the code element. So the fact that I have my code element here generates trouble. It's correct on the front end. We can go and check. I need to save first if I want it to appear. So if I refresh, everything is correct on the front end, but in the editor, Bricks has difficulties to render it. So what I can do is pick my style element and move it somewhere else. And now Bricks is able to render properly my flexbox. Okay, so this one is a big component. I should probably break it down in multiple components because all of these ones is actually a component in itself. The magnifier is also a component, so maybe for later you can do this as an exercise, or I'll do it on the source code for this tutorial. A few things interesting here. So this is styled with Flexbox. We have 3 groups, a first group, a second group that takes the 2 check-in, check-out, the dates element, and a third group here. They are managed as buttons with the same background principle. And the way I did handle the hover state here, let's go and have a look. So this is a bit specific. I did use the new relative color syntax that's available in the most advanced browsers. So it's available in Chrome. Not sure if it's available yet in Firefox. But what happens here is that this is a way to darken my color. So I have my brown color. That's my reference color. And on overstate, I want it darker. So I could define a new color, a darker version. But I don't want to make the calculation by myself and change an Xcode for another Xcode. So what I'm asking is asking the browser, hey browser, I want you to work in the OKLCH color space. Create a color from my brand color. So Chrome will take my brand color that was defined, will place it in the OKLCH color space, which will give us the L, C, and H components of the color available. And then from these components, we recreate a color. I keep C, the chroma, and H, the hue, untouched. But I'm telling it to calculate a new L, the luminance, by reducing the one it got from my reference color by 5. Okay, I hope you follow me. So take my color, break it in L, C, and H component, and create a new color by reducing the value of L by 5. And thanks to this function, calculation, if I change my brand color, the new relative color, that's a relative syntax, will be automatically updated based on my new reference color. So that's very interesting. It's available, I'm sure it's available now in Chrome and Edge, maybe Safari, and not sure for Firefox. Okay, so we are almost finished. Let's work on our last component. I will reduce my search. I'm still in my header. So I have two components for now. I have my logo, my search. So I'm still in the header slot. And I want to insert my third component, which is my nav. The nav itself is a layout component. So it prepares two slots, a left slot and a right slot, to nest other components. Let's add it. Now here it is, my nav with its style element, my slot left and my slot right. So let's start with the slot left. It's simple, it's Flexbox. Flexbox creating a wrapper, and inside of it, two slots, one on the left, one on the right, to nest elements. So to the left, I will first add a text button. I can take the unstyled version this time because I already have imported the styles. Here is my button. Let's change it to the tagline, Airbnbricks your home. The next component is our icon button. Paste it. Make sure we have the slot selected. Inject. There's my small icon. And now in the other slot, I will inject my profile menu component. And here it is. This component is made of wrapper divs to create the layout. Then we have a button. And inside of this button, we have two SVGs, a burger and an avatar. That's what we can see here with, this time, a box shadow on the overstate. And we are done with our header section for our Airbnbricks website. Let's have a final look at the front end. And this is our site. I refresh, you see there's this small entrance animation. We have our logo, large screen, so it's expanded. Our buttons with the overstate created by the pseudo elements. I see there's a typo here I will have to fix. The search elements, I hope it is visible, my magnifier icon with the relative color, change on hover, our home, the icon button with the same pseudo element hover effect, and our profile icon. And this is how we start creating our Airbnbricks website using bricks, and with the help of Structeezy that helps us transform raw HTML into usable bricks elements. With this principle, you can create your own components, you can write your own HTML, you can grab some HTML from various sources on the internet and reuse it directly into bricks to build your page and your website. I hope you liked it. Tell me in the comments if you want me to go on with this series and continue working on this website. Tell me if you are interested in a specific aspect, creating your own components, or how to grab external HTML and make it usable for a bricks website. Anything you would like to know, let me know, and I can plan future video on the topic. If you don't have your Structeezy license yet, don't forget to take it. I wish you very nice builds and I'll see you in the next video.